Before you hear this story, I want you to remember one symbol, a symbol that haunted California and baffled investigators for more than half a century. Detectives chased its creator through thousands of reports, endless interviews, and countless dead ends. Yet despite decades of investigation, they never discovered the man behind it. The world would come to know him only as the Zodiac. July 31st, 1969. 3 newspaper offices begin another ordinary morning. Reporters race to finish articles. Editors prepare the day's headlines. Coffee grows cold beside clattering typewriters. Everything appears perfectly normal. Then, 3 envelopes arrive. One at the Vallejo Times-Herald, one at the San Francisco Chronicle, one at the San Francisco Examiner. Cream-colored, ordinary, anonymous. Inside, investigators would later discover handwritten confessions and 1/3 of a cryptographic puzzle. The writer made a terrifying demand. Publish these pages, or more people would die. At the bottom of every letter appeared the same strange symbol. No name, no fingerprints, no explanation, just a black crosshair. To understand why these letters terrified an entire state, detectives first had to look 7 months into the past. 7 months before those letters arrived, California was preparing for Christmas. Families decorated their homes, streets filled with lights, stores closed early. Everything felt ordinary. About 60 miles northeast of San Francisco, a lonely stretch of road cut through open countryside. Locals knew it simply as Lover's Lane. On the evening of December 20th, 1968, 17-year-old David Faraday picked up 16-year-old Betty Lou Jensen. It was one of their very first dates. Like countless young couples before them, they drove toward the quiet turnout. The night was cold. The road was empty. Nothing suggested they were being watched. Then, another car appeared. It stopped behind them. Its headlights flooded the inside of David's Rambler. At first, it may have looked like another couple, or perhaps a passing patrol officer. Instead, a man stepped out. No warning, no conversation, no robbery, just violence. David Faraday was shot at close range. Betty Lou Jensen ran into the darkness. She never made it far. The killer fired repeatedly. Then, he disappeared into the night. Detectives had no witnesses, no motive, almost no evidence. At the time, nobody knew that California had just witnessed the beginning of the Zodiac Killer. 6 months passed. Detectives searched, interviews were conducted, leads were followed, but the investigation slowly grew cold. Then, on the night of July 4th, 1969, another young couple drove to a quiet parking area at Blue Rock Springs Park. 22-year-old Darlene Ferrin and 19-year-old Michael Majot believed they were alone. Once again, they were wrong. A car entered the parking lot. It stopped. Then, it drove away. For a moment, everything seemed normal. Minutes later, it returned. The driver stepped out carrying a flashlight. Its bright beam flooded the inside of the car. Michael later believed it might be a police officer. It wasn't. Without saying a word, the man opened fire. As the couple cried out, the gunman turned, walked back toward his car, then suddenly stopped. He returned, and fired again. Against all odds, Michael Mageau survived. His testimony would become one of the investigation's most important pieces of evidence. Less than an hour later, a telephone rang at the Vallejo Police Department. A calm male voice said, "I want to report a double murder." He calmly described the attack before adding one sentence that changed everything. "I also killed those kids last year." The anonymous caller had just connected two murders and unknowingly given detectives their first glimpse of a serial killer. By the autumn of 1969, California feared an invisible killer. Detectives had no name, no face, no suspect, only letters and bodies. On the evening of October 11th, 29-year-old taxi driver Paul Stine picked up a passenger in downtown San Francisco. Nothing about the man stood out. He appeared completely ordinary. The destination changed. Instead of stopping where expected, the taxi continued toward Presidio Heights. Quiet streets, expensive homes, almost no one outside. At approximately 9:55 p.m., the taxi stopped. Then, a single gunshot echoed through the night. Paul Stine never had a chance. But the killer wasn't finished. Instead of running, he calmly searched the cab. He removed Paul Stine's wallet, his car keys. Then, he carefully tore away a piece of the driver's blood-stained shirt. 3 teenagers watched everything from the window of a nearby house. They immediately called police. Officers rushed toward the scene. But one critical mistake had already been made. Dispatch described the suspect as a black male. The witnesses had actually described a white man. Moments later, 2 patrol officers encountered a white man walking calmly along Jackson Street. They exchanged only a few words. Then, they let him continue. Minutes later, detectives realized the mistake. The man they had spoken to may have been the Zodiac Killer himself. Days later, another letter arrived. Inside, investigators found something impossible to deny. A piece of Paul Stine's bloody shirt. The killer had escaped once again, but he was about to challenge investigators in a way nobody expected. The murder of Paul Stine changed everything. The Zodiac had proven he could strike in the heart of San Francisco, but killing was no longer enough. He wanted an audience. Another envelope arrived. Inside, detectives found a handwritten letter and another piece of Paul Stine's blood-stained shirt. It was proof the killer wasn't bluffing. Then came the ciphers. Strange symbols, circles, crosses, squares, entire pages filled with characters that seemed impossible to understand. The Zodiac challenged newspapers, demanding they publish his messages. If they refused, he threatened more violence. Police cryptographers struggled. The FBI joined the investigation. Experts searched for patterns. Days became weeks. The codes remained silent. Then, an unexpected breakthrough. A school teacher and his wife, working together at their kitchen table, cracked one of the Zodiac's ciphers. The message shocked investigators. It wasn't a confession. It wasn't an apology. It was a performance. The Zodiac wanted the world to believe he was collecting slaves for the afterlife. Whether he truly believed those words remains unknown. Every new letter became front-page news. Every cipher, another puzzle. Every newspaper, another stage. By now, the Zodiac wasn't simply hiding from investigators. He was controlling the investigation itself. The Zodiac had turned murder into a spectacle. But his boldest attack was still to come. September 27th, 1969. Lake Berryessa. Unlike his previous attacks, the Zodiac chose daylight. Families were enjoying the lake. Fishermen lined the shore. Nothing suggested evil was only minutes away. Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard found a quiet spot overlooking the water. They talked, they laughed, they believed they were completely alone. Then, a man appeared on the hillside. At first, he seemed almost hesitant. He disappeared behind a tree. Then, he came back. This time, he wore a black executioner's hood. Over his chest, a white crosshair symbol. The same symbol that had already terrified California. Holding a handgun, he calmly explained that he was an escaped convict. He only wanted their car. Their money. He promised nobody would be hurt. Brian believed him. Together, they tied each other's hands. The stranger watched, without emotion. Then, he took out a knife. He stabbed them, again and again, before quietly walking away. No panic, no hurry, only silence. Before leaving, he walked to Brian Hartnell's car. Using a black marker, he wrote the dates of his previous attacks and drew the Zodiac symbol. An hour later, a calm voice telephoned police. He reported the crime himself. Then, he disappeared once again. Cecilia Shepard died 2 days later. Brian Hartnell survived. His testimony gave investigators their clearest description yet. Yet somehow, the Zodiac vanished once again. For the first time, investigators knew exactly what the Zodiac looked like, or so they thought. The Zodiac kept writing. More letters arrived. More threats followed. Then, the murders stopped. Detectives pursued thousands of leads, fingerprints, handwriting, DNA, yet the killer remained unidentified. Arthur Lee Allen became the most famous suspect, but despite years of investigation, no decisive evidence ever proved he was the Zodiac. Other suspects came and went. Each brought new hope. Each left new questions. More than 50 years later, the case remains officially unsolved. The Zodiac left behind victims, letters, and fear. But never certainty. Perhaps his greatest weapon was never the gun or the knife. It was the mystery. Somewhere, inside thousands of pages of evidence, the truth may still exist, waiting to be found.